This video is purely a comparison test video between Android and iPhone using the DJI Spark. According to comments on my other Spark videos and some forum posts, DJI supposedly favors iOS over Android. And after I got remarkably poor distance performance on my Spark, I decided to try different Android devices. They all seem to have the same crappy performance, so I got an OTG cable hoping to fix that issue. And although the OTG cable did seem to help, I wanted to put some data behind it. So it was at this point I decided to do some testing between iPhone and Android. So here's my test. I flew in the suburbs of a fairly large metropolis, that is Kansas City, and I flew at a park with a lake and wide open spaces. I flew at both 150 feet and 393 feet. The reason for 150 feet was to try and stay as low to the ground without having to worry about running into any objects. And the reason for 393 feet is actually in the manual when talking about the max distance achievable on a Spark. It specifically states that it was tested at 393 feet. For each test, there were 4 flights. So I did 2 on Android, 1 would be over Wi-Fi, 1 would be over OTG. I then did the same thing on iPhone, 1 over Wi-Fi, 1 over OTG. And I did this using the controller. I did this flying the exact same flight path and utilizing the same features and functions on the controller and the Spark, which is sport mode. And I should note they were not all done on the same day, which means the temperatures were slightly different. The time of day was slightly different, which means the interference could have been slightly different. So I just want to note all this when compiling my data. Looking at the test results, some of it was completely obvious, completely expected, and some of it was not. So I'm just going to go through my data here real quick. I'll probably throw it on the screen. I'm going to guess somewhere over here. Basically what I found was while I was flying in the suburbs, there was no possible way to get the max distance out of the Spark. This is not a surprise. No matter if I was 150 feet or 393 feet, the furthest distance away I got was 3,155 feet, and that was actually on the Wi-Fi for the iPhone. So some interesting pieces to note. The iPhone on Wi-Fi did slightly better than the iPhone on OTG when in the suburbs. That was completely unexpected and gives some credence to DJI favoring iPhone. The Android, when it was on the OTG cable, did approximately the same as the iPhone, but Android on Wi-Fi did not do as well. I mean, that's just the end of the story there. Another thing to note about the suburbs is flying at 393 feet height is significantly better than flying at 150 feet height. And this is not surprising to me, maybe surprising to some of you. The idea is the higher up the Spark is, the less interference it'll have and the further distance you'll get out of it. Now some of you may think, okay, 150 feet, it's closer to the ground, which means that the physical distance between the controller and the Spark is not as far, so you would think you might be able to fly further, but the problem is the interference just gets too much for the technology. So looking at the best distance in the suburbs, at 150 feet, I got 1,224 feet away. And looking at 393 feet height, I got 3,155 feet away. So doubling the distance when flying at 393 feet. When looking at flying in the park, the distances were significantly better. When flying at 150 feet, the best distance I got was on Android using the OTG cable. However, again, the iPhone, it did better on Wi-Fi than it did on the OTG cable, which is strange. When looking at 150 feet, the furthest distance I got away was 5,604 feet, which was over a mile. It was awesome. But looking at flying at 393 feet, the best distance I got was 7,698 feet. And again, that was on the Android OTG cable. So Android using the OTG is significantly better in this case when there's no interference than using the iPhone. Now looking at Android Wi-Fi and comparing that to flying with the iPhone, I got mixed results here, but overall the iPhone is a little more consistent. The Android Wi-Fi really varies on the height you're flying at, so it comes down to the interference. Now if I look across the other axis and look at 150 feet versus 393 feet, without a question the distance is double, almost double there as well. It is significantly easier and better flying at 393 feet no matter where you're flying. Whether you're flying in the suburbs or a big open park, it's better to fly higher up. In terms of distance alone, Android using the OTG cable wins this one pretty handedly. It did notably lose at 393 feet in the suburbs. The iPhone on Wi-Fi did better. That could have just been a fluke, it's hard to say, but the Android OTG was extremely close into that max distance that the iPhone got on Wi-Fi. All the other flights, the Android OTG destroyed the competition of the iPhone or Android on Wi-Fi. In terms of using OTG over Wi-Fi, again, the Android on OTG destroys an Android on Wi-Fi, but the iPhone seems to have little to no effect when it uses OTG versus Wi-Fi. In fact, in 3 of these 4 cases, the iPhone on Wi-Fi went further than the iPhone on the OTG cable. Now, in terms of the claim that DJI favors iOS, I would say that that is accurate. There are some little nuances that are present when using the Android app that are not present when using the iPhone app. Things like going into quick shots. On an Android, you get Chinese characters instead of an English language, where when you use the iPhone, you get a prompt that is in English. The iPhone is quicker to recognize when you've lost a signal and then regained a signal, understanding when to return to home. Those things happen much faster than on an Android. And in fact, on Android, in some of these tests, I flew being able to see the screen no problem on the phone or the device, and it told me I didn't have a signal. But I continued to fly and have full control of the Spark. So I would say that iPhone is definitely more native when using DJI products. However, the Android still seems to have better performance. I think that pretty much covers everything. If I left you scratching your head or you got more questions, post them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer anything that I didn't answer during this video. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button. Please subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I'm going to leave you with some content flying over the lake and flying over the suburbs because it's still just beautiful footage from the Spark.